Out on the trail, miles from anywhere, a motorcycle's true character shows. It's not about speed or style. It's about whether it'll still run when everything else quits. Some bikes were fast, others were pretty, but a few were built from tougher stuff. Machines that could take the hits, eat the miles, and keep thumping long after the sun went down. These are the bikes that never gave up. The ones you could drop, drown, or ride halfway across the desert and still kick back to life. Today, we honor them, 10 of the most indestructible dirt bikes ever built. Because in off-road riding, toughness isn't an option, it's survival. (1985 to 2000) Honda XR 600R. In the mid-1980s, when desert racing was raw and merciless, Honda rolled out a machine that would rewrite what endurance meant on two wheels. The XR 600R wasn't built for glamour or showroom polish. It was born for punishment. Designed to conquer the brutal Baja 1000 and the unforgiving desert rallies of the era, it carried the torch from the mighty XR 500 and took it further than anyone imagined. At its heart beat a 591 cubic centimeter air-cooled SOHC single that thrived on neglect. No radiators to leak, no electronics to fail. Its steel frame and long-travel 43mm Showa forks soaked up rocks, ruts, and everything the desert could throw at it. Riders called it heavy, but they also called it unstoppable. The XR 600R could take thousands of off-road miles without a rebuild, earning 6 straight Baja 1000 victories that sealed its legend. Even decades later, you'll still find old XR 600s thumping away on dusty trails, engines ticking steadily like the day they were new. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't fast by modern standards. But it never quit. And in the desert, that made it king. 1996 to present, Suzuki DR 650. When the 1990s brought a wave of high-tech dual sports filled with digital displays and fancy plastics, Suzuki quietly went the other way. In 1996, they released the DR 650, a motorcycle so simple, so brutally honest, that it felt like a relic even when it was new. But that was exactly its secret. Its 644 cubic centimeter air and oil-cooled single didn't need a radiator, a computer, or any of the fragile extras that strand riders miles from help. A Mikuni BST-40 carburetor fed the beast, and you could start it with a kick, a button, or a prayer, whichever came first. The steel frame was plain but nearly unbreakable, built to shrug off crashes, drops, and years of hard riding. Owners tell stories of DRS that have run hundreds of thousands of miles without ever needing a rebuild. Drown it in a river, bake it under desert sun, drop it in the dirt, it'll still start. If it doesn't, you can fix it with the tools in your pocket. Nearly 3 decades later, Suzuki still sells it, nearly unchanged. The world calls it outdated. Its fans call it something else. The Apocalypse Bike. 1976 to 1981, Yamaha XT500. Long before adventure bike became a buzzword, Yamaha built one by accident. The XT500 was never meant to be a world traveler, just a tough, simple thumper for riders who preferred dirt over pavement. But in 1979 and again in 1980, it stunned the world by winning the Paris-Dakar Rally, proving that simplicity could outlast speed. Its 499 cubic centimeters, air-cooled SOHC single made about 32 horsepower. Nothing wild, but it would run forever. With no battery, no radiator, and no starter motor, it had nothing to fail. Just a kick lever, a big steel tank, and a frame light enough to drag out of the sand if you had to. The XT500 earned a reputation as the bike that always came back to life. Bury it in mud, drop it in the dunes, flood the carb, kick it again, and it would cough, sputter, and roar back like it was laughing at you. From that unbreakable spirit came Yamaha's legendary Tenere line, the modern heirs to the XT's DNA. The XT500 wasn't just an off-road machine, it was the motorcycle that taught the world how to cross a desert and come home again. 1987 to 2018, Kawasaki KLR 650. If the world ever ended tomorrow, there's a good chance someone would still be riding a KLR 650 through the rubble. Born in 1987 as a globe-trotting dual sport, the KLR wasn't flashy, fast, or refined, but it was tough enough to survive anything. Even the U.S. military adopted a diesel-powered version for use in desert operations, trusting it to run where trucks and tanks couldn't. Underneath sat a 651 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled single housed in a high-tensile steel frame, built to take a beating. A massive 6.1-gallon tank gave it a range most riders could only dream of. Hundreds of miles between fuel stops. Owners tell stories of KLRS with 150,000. Even 200,000 miles on the clock, still thumping steadily with original internals. They handle blazing heat, high-altitude passes, and muddy trails without complaint. It isn't pretty and it isn't high-tech, but that's exactly why it's loved. The KLR doesn't quit, it just keeps going. Riders joke that cockroaches and KLRS will be the only things left after the apocalypse. They might not be wrong. 1979 to 2004, Honda XR 250R. For more than 2 decades, the XR 250R was the faithful companion of trail riders everywhere, the smaller, friendlier sibling of the mighty XR 600R. Honda built it for the weekend explorer, the rider who wanted to go deep into the woods and still make it home before dark. Its 249 cubic centimeter air-cooled SOHC single wasn't powerful, but it was bulletproof. Weighing just around 260 pounds with a smooth 6-speed transmission, the XR 250R felt light, balanced, and easy to handle on tight trails or rocky climbs. Everything about it was simple. No radiators, no electronics, no nonsense, just a motorcycle that could be fixed anywhere with a few tools and a little patience. It would start on the first kick, survive endless drops, and run season after season without ever asking for much. Riders joked that it didn't leak oil. It marked its territory. Whether you were a beginner learning clutch control or an old hand chasing dusty horizons, the XR 250R was always there, steady and loyal. For countless riders around the world, it wasn't just their first real dirt bike, it was their first taste of freedom. 2000 to present Suzuki DRZ 400. When Suzuki launched the DRZ 400 in 2000, they weren't chasing headlines. They were building the missing link between off-road grit and everyday practicality. It was a dirt bike you could ride to work all week, then thrash through the woods on Sunday without changing a thing. Its 398 cubic centimeters DOHC liquid-cooled engine was smooth, reliable, and surprisingly strong for a single cylinder. The hybrid steel and aluminum frame struck a perfect balance between stiffness and durability, while the simple electrical system made it almost impossible to kill. No fragile sensors, no electronic gimmicks, just solid Japanese engineering that works every time you thumb the starter. Riders have racked up over 50,000 off-road miles on these machines without cracking the engine open. It shrugs off crashes, mud, and long storage like it's nothing. In the right hands, it's nearly indestructible, and in the wrong hands, it'll forgive you anyway. More than 2 decades later, Suzuki still builds it, almost unchanged. That's because you don't mess with something that already does everything. For trail riders, commuters, and wanderers alike, the DRZ 400 remains the ultimate all-arounder. The modern Swiss Army knife of motorcycles. 2003 to present Yamaha WR 450F. Born from Yamaha's championship-winning YZ motocross line, the WR 450F took that raw racing DNA and tuned it for endurance, not just speed. It was built for riders who spent hours, not laps, out in the woods, the dunes, and the mud. Under the tank beats a 450 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled DOHC 4-valve engine, paired with Yamaha's famously tough aluminum frame. The modern fuel injection system keeps it crisp and reliable, even after years of hard use, and riders quickly discovered something remarkable. This wasn't a high-strung race bike. It was a thoroughbred that could go the distance. Enduro teams have run entire seasons without rebuilding their WRS, pushing through brutal heat, deep mud, and endless punishment. It's a bike that never complains. It just digs in and keeps going. In many ways, the WR 450F carries the same spirit that made Honda's old XR series legendary: simple, tough, and loyal. Yamaha just gave it sharper claws and modern legs. They call it the Iron Horse for a reason, because when the trails get ugly and the miles start to hurt, this machine doesn't slow down. It only proves what endurance truly means. 2000 to 2010, KTM 450 EXC. By the early 2000s, Japan had owned the off-road world for decades. Then KTM showed up with something to prove that Europe could build a dirt bike just as tough, and maybe even tougher. The result was the 450 EXC, a lean, purpose-built machine that would redefine endurance on 2 wheels. Its 449cc 4-stroke single sat inside a chrome moly steel frame, light, rigid, and ready to take a beating. At just around 260 pounds, it felt agile but unshakably solid. WP suspension soaked up punishment mile after mile, while the minimalist design meant fewer parts to break and less to go wrong. This wasn't a bike for showrooms, it was a weapon for the desert. Privateers took the 450 EXC into the Dakar Rally, hammering it across thousands of miles of sand and stone. The bike came back bruised, but never broken. It could handle heat, vibration, and fatigue that would cripple most machines. The 450 EXC turned KTM from a niche European brand into a world symbol of toughness. Its legacy still defines the company's DNA today. Precision-built, race-tested, and built to last long after the finish line fades. 1980 to 1987 BMW R80G/S. Before adventure bike was even a term, BMW built one almost by accident. The R80G/S, short for Gelände/Straße, or off-road/street, was unlike anything else on the market. It wasn't a dirt bike, and it wasn't a tourer. It was something new, a machine that could cross continents and come home in one piece. At its core was a 797 cubic centimeter air-cooled boxer twin, mounted low for balance and turning big, steady torque. The single backbone frame was simple but strong, and the shaft drive meant no messy chains to wear out in the dust. This bike didn't mind rough roads, scorching heat, or days without rest. When BMW entered it in the Paris-Dakar rally, few believed such a heavy machine could survive. It didn't just survive, it won. 5 years in a row from 1981 to 1985. Riders learned they could trust it anywhere, deserts, mountains, or endless stretches of bad road. The R80G/S became the blueprint for every adventure bike that followed. Even today, many still rumble across continents, their boxers ticking away under the same sun they chased 4 decades ago. Proof that true endurance never goes out of style. 2005 to present, Honda CRF 450X. When Honda retired the mighty XR600R, riders wondered if anything could ever fill its boots. Then came the CRF 450X, not just a replacement, but a rebirth of Honda's desert-dominating spirit for a new century. Its 449 cubic centimeters liquid-cooled single brought modern muscle to the trails, paired with fuel injection and a wide-ratio 5-speed gearbox that made it equally at home crawling through rocks or flying down open desert. The aluminum frame kept it light yet solid, while the premium Showa suspension soaked up punishment mile after mile. Despite its high-tech heart, the CRF 450X stayed true to old-school Honda values: simple to maintain, easy to trust, and nearly impossible to break. It went on to prove itself the hard way, winning the grueling Baja 1,006 years in a row from 2006 through 2011. This wasn't a race bike dressed for the trail. It was a trail bike built for war. Strong, fast, and unshakably reliable, it carried the flame of Honda toughness into the modern era. The XR may have built the legend, but the CRF 450X made sure it never died. The years come and go, but these bikes keep rolling. They've outlasted their riders, outlived their rivals, and proven that good engineering never dies. Each one told the same story of grit, trust, and the kind of craftsmanship that asked for no praise, only respect. Maybe that's why we still remember them. They weren't perfect. They rattled, leaked, and kicked back hard. But they always got you home. So here's to the machines that refuse to quit. How about you? Did you ever ride one that just wouldn't die? Share your story below, because legends like these deserve to live forever.